All right, naming acids, our last piece of notes for this chapter on naming compounds. So far what we've had is we've had three different types. We've had ionic, and one thing which I want you to know in regards to ionic compounds are always made up of a metal and a non-metal. Okay, so you look at it, if the first element that's in this is a metal, then you know it's ionic. Now we also had molecular. A molecular is a non-metal and a non-metal. So both of them are non-metals. So if you look at the first element and it's a non-metal, then you know it's molecular. This last one that we're going to look at, acids, what you look at is the first thing that's in it is a hydrogen. If it starts with a hydrogen, then for our purposes at this point in your learning career of acids, then it's, or learning career in chemistry, then it's an acid. Okay? So on the test, there is going to be a section where I'm not going to tell you what type it is. What you have to do is you have to figure out what it is. How do you do that? We'll look at the first element. The first element is a metal on the periodic table, then it's an ionic compound over here. If the first element is a non-metal, then it's molecular. If the first element is a hydrogen, then it's an acid. That's how you're going to know which type it is. Okay? So, all right. So now if we go over the notes that you should have already written down and sent to me about naming acids, looks like that. All right. So the first thing is acids always start with hydrogen. I have down H to the X. What do I mean by X? Well, it can be H1, H2, H3, H4. I usually don't get H4. And remember, H1, you just leave it blank. But I gave you a couple examples there. We got HCl, so that's one H with the Cl. Then there's H2SO4, that's two H's. And then there's H3PO4, that's three H's. So it starts with an H for our purposes in chemistry at this point in your career. We're going to assume those are all acids. Right? There are some exceptions to that rule. There are some compounds that don't start with H that are acids, but you know what? You can worry about those if you decide to go on in chemistry and go further and become a chemical engineer. All right, so there's three different ways that you need to know on how to name an acid. So in the notes, I gave you the three ways and wrote them out for you. The first one is you got HCl. Now what you have to do first of all is you have to name that ionically. And that's what I did in the notes is I gave you the name ionically as hydrogen chloride. Notice that it ends in "ide." Why is it "ide"? Because it's just the element chlorine. Now because it ends in "ide", then when you name it as an acid, it becomes hydroblankic acid. So because it's "ide", it's hydroblankic. Okay? Now what do we put in the blank? We put the root part chlor. So the name for HCl becomes hydrochloric acid, hydrochloric acid. All right, so that's the first way. "Ide" is hydroblankic. It's the only one that's going to start with hydro. All the other two ways do not have hydro out in front. Second one, HNO2. Name it ionically. It's hydrogen, and NO2 is nitrite. Now, the way in which I like to describe this is, where does the President of the United States live? Well, the President of the United States, no matter who it is, always lives in the White House. So white ends in "ite," and house ends in "ouse." So what we do is we take that nitrite, the ITE like white, and we change it to "ouse" like house. So we're going to take and make it blank us acid. In this one we use that root piece, which is nitra, and we use "ouse," so it becomes nitrous acid. All right, all because it was nitrite. All right, third one, HNO3. With HNO3, that name it again ionically is hydrogen nitrate. This ended in "ate." So now my key thing on this one is you ate something icky. So we're going to take that ending and make it, instead of "ate," we're going to make it "ick." So it becomes blankic acid. Now notice the difference between this one and the one up above where we had hydroblankic. This one does not have hydro out in front. It's just blankic acid. So this one is nitrate, so it's nitric acid. So those are the three ways that you name an acid. First one, if it's "ide," it's hydroblankic acid. If it's "ite," then it's blank us acid. If it's "ate," then it's blankic acid. All right, so those are the three ways. Now the other thing that I also want to point out is on all of these pieces of notes, there was a spot about the ionic name. The ionic name is not the acid's name. It's only a piece to get to the acid name. All right, so that's not the answer. It's just a piece that you need in order to get to the answer. All right, then down at the bottom of the notes, we did it backwards. So now if I gave you the name, you got to come up with the formula. So the first one I gave was hydronitric acid. So it's hydro-blank-ic acid. So that means we name it ionically, it would become hydrogen. And then it's nitra, that's the root piece. And because it's hydro-blank-ic, we end it in ide. So it's hydrogen nitride. Now because it's hydrogen nitride, then we take hydrogen, that's a +1. And then we have nitrogen, he's a -3. We take those two, crisscross them like we've been doing, and we end up with H3N. So the formula for hydronitric acid is H3N. All right, next one, sulfurous acid. This one ends in us, so we're going to name it ionically as a step to get to the formula. So it's hydrogen. Remember, they all start with hydrogen. So when you name them ionically, they're all going to start with hydrogen. So it's hydrogen, and then it's sulf. And then because it ends in us, white house, so it ends in ite. So it becomes hydrogen sulfite. So then we do our formula, and we go, well, hydrogen, that's +1. And then we got SO3. Where did I get that from? It came from this, because it's sulfite. And that's SO3 is -2. Those don't cancel, so you got to crisscross those numbers, and you end up with H2SO3 as your formula, which is in your notes. Last one, sulfuric acid, ends in ic. It's not hydro-blank-ic, this is just ic. So it means ate something icky. So we name it ionically, it's hydrogen. Again, they all start with hydrogen. Hydrogen, the root piece is sulf. So it's sulf, and because it's ate something icky, it becomes sulfate. So it's hydrogen sulfate. Then we go to writing the formula. Well, it's hydrogen, that's a +1. Then we got sulfate from the polyatomic ion chart. That's SO4, that's a -2. Those guys don't cancel each other, so we got to take them, crisscross them. So you get H2SO4 as your formula. Right, so those are the 3 ways in which you name acids. And that actually concludes our notes for this chapter. So we'll see you now as we go into the review and on to the test, because that's all going to be coming up here really soon. So have fun, get busy. See ya.